This episode of Mission Log is brought to you by HostGator.com. Do you need to launch your own website? If you're looking for one of the easiest ways to register, host, and build your site, you should check out HostGator.com. They have tools to help you get started immediately, whether you're transferring a domain or building your site from scratch. So, all you fans who want to open up, here's a look at my robotguts.com or drcorbyforever.net or Ken is secretly a robot.org. You can just head over to HostGator.com and have that up before we're done with today's episode. Speaking of drcorbyforever.net, a .net address is the best way to get a good domain name these days. Grab your .net today. It gets better, though. HostGator has 24/7 tech support on the phone, live chat, or email, and you can choose from shared or dedicated servers. All that plus packages that include unlimited storage and unlimited bandwidth. Order now with the coupon code MissionLog, and you'll get 30% off at HostGator.com.
Now entering Nerdist.com.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 66. Wink of an Eye.
Welcome to another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
What's the show next week, John?
Ken, we haven't actually done this week's episode yet. We're doing Wink of an Eye.
Dude, I just did this week's episode. Were you not? Oh, I'm sorry. I was going a little fast for you, wasn't I?
Yeah, we have to do the show in real time. Our listeners have to understand the show in real time, and we cannot do an accelerated. I guess if we slowed it down, then maybe they'd be able to hear the show.
I do think, though, if we could get people to listen in Scalosian time, they would find it accelerating.
Whoa, I see what you did there. Well played, Ken.
Yeah, really. It's
well
just
played.
I guess we should actually tell people in real time what it is we do, shouldn't we?
Sure.
Every week, we watch an episode of Star Trek and we watch it again, and then, we might even watch it again. And then we try to adopt everything that they do in that episode and live our lives that way, which is why I'm actually I've already done everything I have to do between now and 60.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
That's
I know.
Incredible. Wait, does that mean that we're done with Mission Log then?
Twice now I've been done with Mission Log, actually. But for you, I'll go back and do the whole thing. It's not the Scalosian way, but, it takes a little bit longer. Unlike, as you discussed in this episode, Wink of an Eye, as you mentioned, I believe, is the episode that we're doing this week.
Yeah. Well, for those of us who can only process the show in real time, remember you can also contact us in real time on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. The handle Mission Log Pod. You can call us at 323-522-5641. You can email us missionlog@roddenberry.com. We also have a beautiful site on the internet, www.missionlogpodcast.com. Remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
Now, somehow, because I was going so fast, I've actually already heard the trivia that you haven't done yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure how that works exactly, but for people who were not, living at my speed, why don't you lay out the trivia for people again, and I'm going to take a nap.
Okay, I'd be glad to. So,
that was a great nap. Oh, man, I am so ready. Oh, sorry, I did it again. I did it again. I'm sorry.
You're going to have to listen to trivia in real time. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. All right. So this week's episode, Wink of an Eye, written by our old friend Lee Cronin, a.k.a. Gene Kuhn, going under the pen name Lee Cronin for this one. Now, it's worth pointing out that Kuhn worked on the show Wild Wild West before Star Trek, and interestingly enough, there's an episode of that show in which the bad guy speeds himself up in order to commit crimes. So a little bit of cross-pollination of the ideas there. This is an older idea, though there's actually a 1901 H.G. Wells short story called The New Accelerator, in which an elixir makes the characters speed up to the point where everyone else around them appears immobilized. They can perceive moments of incredible speed very easily. They describe like the cracking of a whip that they can see just kind of in slow motion. Now, it wasn't until 2001, so 100 years later, that was turned into an episode of the Hallmark Channel's Infinite Worlds of H.G. Wells. The script for this show, for Winkham and I, was written by Arthur Heinemann, who has a couple more upcoming TOS credits we will get to in a few weeks. He actually got his start as an animator and then started writing in the 1950s. Now, Ken, you and I have mostly been watching the remastered versions of Star Trek, but we kind of flip back and forth. I've got both available to me, and I know that our listeners, some are watching the remasters, some are watching the original, and sure, you can debate like crazy which one you like better or worse. But there's something that I wanted to point out very specifically about the remastered version of this one, because I think it's just very cool. The Scalosian city where the landing party first beams down was originally the same matte painting used in A Taste of Armageddon. They gave it a little bit of a blue cast, but you can tell that it's the Eminiar city from that episode. So now it's replaced with a brand new city. And they did a really good job. They basically had to go in and rotoscope that whole scene where you see the city behind Kirk and Compton. So I thought it was really, really neat. And you can faintly make out that there is a version of Habitat 67 in there. So you have this alien city, and kind of right in the foreground, you have their version of Habitat 67. Now, that was an experimental housing complex designed for the 1967 World's Fair in Montreal. It's still there, and I'm kind of an architecture buff. So as you would well assume, I'm kind of fascinated by the intentions of that building being a high-density urban space. It still allows some bit of individual room. It's an apartment complex, but you've got every unit has to have its own entryway to the outside. It has to have its own garden area. It's just very forward-thinking architecture, so I like that there's a nod to it in the special effects here. Deela, the co-star of the show, the guest star here, is played by Kathy Brown. She made a lot of TV appearances before retiring in 1980. I wanted to point out here that she is a little older than most Star Trek female guest stars. She was 38 at the time. We've seen a lot of women guest starring on the show as Kirk's love interest who were like 25, 26. She is best known for having a recurring role on Bonanza, and she married actor Darren McGavin in 1969, and they stayed married until she passed away. Does the name Darren McGavin sound familiar to you, Ken?
He was he was the dad in A Christmas Story, and he was also he was in Hangar 18.
Right,
I believe,
yes.
And he was a foil for Fox Mulder on the X-Files.
Oh, right, yeah. Terrific character actor, and but I think we all best know him as the old man in A Christmas Story. Rael in this episode is played by TV and B-movie actor Jason Evers. And by the way, we don't want to confuse the name Rael with the modern-day alien cult Rael or the Raelians. Have you heard of them? I'm not making this up, Ken.
I believe they actually played the Bumpuses in The Christmas Story.
You were so close. The Raelians are a UFO cult which started in the early to mid 70s when Rael, the now self-named and self-appointed interpreter of alien knowledge, Rael had an alien visitation in 1973. So. If you want to join an alien cult, then that may be the one for you.
One wonders where the Scalosian Society is in terms of evolution right now. I like to think that, as you are listening to this, their forebears are crawling from the primordial ooze.
Prologue. Arriving at a beautiful but deserted downtown planet Scalos, a landing party from the Enterprise finds the place completely empty except for a mosquito or something buzzing in Kirk's ear. Doesn't make any sense. They got a distress call, but there's no one here. Then one of the party, wearing a red shirt, we'll give him the honor of a name this time, Compton, just disappears without a trace. I mean, literally disappears, just vanishes before McCoy's eyes right after taking a water sample from a fountain. Act 1. On board the Enterprise, things aren't quite working right. Systems are suddenly functioning and then not functioning. Kirk rewatches the distress call from Scalos again. It was pre-recorded, obviously, but there's no clue what happened. In sickbay, things are weird. Chapel reports that all the cabinets have been opened and all the instruments have been examined. Kirk is in for a physical, but that darn buzzing fly is bothering him again. He's starting to think he might be imagining it, but McCoy says he's okay. Now, the only logical answer is that there must be an intruder. Systems are still haywire, and Spock reports that the environmental controls are being messed with. Both of them rush off to life support to find a force field. Once they get in, they find an air conditioner. Well, it's a piece of alien equipment, according to Spock. They can't get near it, and Kirk orders that they fire upon it. Suddenly, their phasers leap out of their hands, and Kirk and Spock find themselves getting punched and pushed back by an invisible force. Then there's that fly or whatever buzzing around in Kirk's ear. You'd think Starfleet would have put bug zappers on all their ships by now. Back on the bridge, Kirk and Spock consult the ship's computer, which is really not much help. There are a lot of unknown variables, but what we do know is that there's an alien force on board trying to take over the ship. Well, at least we have that to go on. Now, because there's no Starbucks on the Enterprise, the yeoman wanders the bridge with coffee for everyone. That buzzing starts again, but Kirk has a sip, and in very short order, everything around him starts slowing down, really slow, like everyone is immobile. Then out of nowhere, a gorgeous woman appears on the bridge. All right. She even goes in for a kiss right away. Hey, this should make Kirk's day. Oh, but she introduces herself as Deela, the enemy. Oh, no. Act 2. Before Kirk can flip to page 42 of the Starfleet Manual of Seducing Gorgeous Invading Aliens, Deela explains what's going on. The crew is fine. They're just all running at their normal pace, but Kirk has now been accelerated to match the speed at which the Scalosians exist. Deela goes in for another kiss. Hey, looks like everything on Scalos is sped up. So Deela is the queen, and she has chosen Kirk as her king. The rest of the Scalosians are on board, and they are converting the Enterprise for their needs. Kirk tries to stun Deela with his phaser, but even the beam from his weapon is too slow now. No pun intended. Deela shows that she has a weapon of her own strapped to her wrist. Kirk tries to negotiate for his ship, but Deela's playing it a little coy, like, oh, come on, you'll like it. We cut back to the perspective of the crew. Kirk has simply disappeared. Kirk has run off to the environmental controls to see what he can do. And who is guarding the door but our old friend Compton, the red shirt? Compton seems pretty well swayed over to the Scalosian point of view. Kirk takes it all in stride until he kicks the crap out of Compton. He rushes into the room where a couple of the Scalosians are armed and waiting to stun the captain. Compton must have had some sense knocked into him by Kirk because he too rushes in during the fracas. Compton must not have passed the hand-to-hand section at the academy because the Scalosians knock him to the ground pretty easily. By the way, he has a little scratch on his neck. Okay, up on the bridge, Spock is really getting into the coffee. He's not just deciding if he likes Yirgacheffe better than Pacamara. He's actually pretty sure that the captain's coffee was tainted with something that led to his disappearance. We'll need to get this to a barista right away. Deela stops by to see Kirk, and she's really got a thing for him. Her subordinates try to steer her away, but she's kind of smitten with this inferior man. When he wakes up, they show off the changes they've made to the Enterprise environmental controls. Kirk tries but fails to do anything with it since the unit is rigged. He notices Compton now looking like a very old corpse. The damage inflicted on him was magnified by the acceleration. Too bad. This can happen to Kirk, too, if he's not careful. Kirk has run to the medical lab where he very cleverly is leaving a message in the computer for Spock about this situation. Hopefully Spock will find it before it's too late. Deela catches him in the act, but she's pretty confident this won't have any effect on their plans. The Scalosians are using their environmental hookup to deep freeze the Enterprise, but Deela is sure Spock will never get the message in time. Act 3. Deela is good at many things, one of them being exposition. She tells Kirk that the Scalosians used to be more like Earthlings, living in a normal time frame, but a combination of disasters led her people to live at an accelerated rate. They can't reproduce, which means they have been in the habit of kidnapping others to help propagate their species. They'll be storing the Enterprise crew in suspended animation until they're needed. Kirk offers to help in some other way, but she says no. Deela gets a call from her second-in-command, Rael, down on life support. He's ready for them to beam down to the planet and activate the deep freeze. Kirk slips away, leaving his message in the computer for Spock. He's also clever enough that he beats Deela to the transporter room and disables the controls. He can't beam down, and this throws a wrench into their plans. Kirk's a pretty good liar, and Deela asks Rael to look into all possibilities for the delay. Meanwhile, in regular time, McCoy has determined that the water is to blame, and Kirk's coffee had been spiked. Spock notices the buzzing in his pointed ears, and now he's got a theory. Deela and Kirk are killing time in Kirk's quarters while the transporter issue is being fixed. Deela fixes her hair, and Kirk goes in for a kiss. Oh, but he also tries to pry her away from the weapon on her wrist. She threatens him a little, but she's still buttering him up. Or is it him buttering her up? On the bridge, Spock plays back the Scalosian distress call and somehow manages to watch the prologue from the episode. He speeds up the tape and realizes that the buzzing sound is exactly what the Scalosians sound like when sped up. At the same time, McCoy has discovered the tape that Kirk left behind, and now everyone on the bridge is in on the Scalosian plan. Rael has finished repairs on the transporter and tries to radio Deela. She's just not answering, and he sets off to find her. Cut to interior Kirk's quarters. Kirk is sitting on the edge of his bed, pulling on his boots because he just finished polishing his boots. Deela is looking in the mirror, fixing her tousled hair because she really likes fixing her hair. When Rael enters, he's not happy at all. He attempts to beat up Kirk, which we know would be deadly, and he has him cornered. Act 4. Deela uses her weapon on Rael. Now, boys, stop fighting. She admonishes Rael for his violent outburst. She also puts him in his place about his jealousy and reiterates that she has chosen Kirk for his necessary purpose. The transporter isn't quite ready, and she sends him away. Kirk is now acting like a man who got a face full of spores on Omicron Ceti 3. He's pretty happy with the current situation and is ready to beam down to the planet with Deela. The rest of the crew, they'll be okay. Back to real time, McCoy has come up with an antidote, but Spock takes a swig of Scalosian water to speed himself up and take it to Kirk. Kirk and Deela are in the transporter room, and all the other Scalosians except for Rael have left by now, and the very docile Kirk breaks the ruse. He reaches for her weapon and runs off to life support to stop Rael, who should show up but a sped-up Spock. He and Kirk disable the Scalosian machine along with Rael. When Deela sees what has happened, she assumes the worst. Kirk has the upper hand, but he assumes that they would do the same thing again and the Federation would quarantine the area. Then the Scalosians will surely die. In the transporter room, Kirk is ready to send off Deela. She warns that Kirk and Spock will never get back to their normal speed as she and Rael are beamed back to their planet. Spock gives Kirk the untested antidote, and he drinks it, returning to normal time. Spock stays a little longer, though, and in his accelerated state, he makes a bunch of repairs of the Enterprise. He flashes into normal time on the bridge as it is time to pull away from Scalos. Uhura accidentally plays back the tape of the Scalosians, but Kirk leaves it on long enough to express his goodbye to Deela.
You know, I would say this is definitely an episode of Star Trek.
Yeah? Well, how do you come to that conclusion? I carefully tested scientific hypothesis.
Well, you know, there is science stuff about it, but we're not going to bother with that. I'm just going to say, you know, if we're watching this episode of Star Trek, we would definitely say this is an episode of Star Trek. By any other name, this would be an episode of Star Trek.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, I think I see what you did there.
I actually did two things there. You sort of pushed me into one when you say, did I test it scientifically? There's science involved, okay, John? Don't worry.
Sure.
The point is we can just sit and watch it and see it and, watch a really wonderful alien make out with Kirk for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Kind of a fan of hers.
Yeah, well, me too. We'll get to that.
Yeah. I think we should. Yeah. I think we should spend quite a bit of time on that.
Okay, we will.
Sped up and slowed down.
Let's spend some time on some other observations here. Spock has a really dumb line at the end, but I feel like the episode redeems itself a little bit because we get to send it off with a more melancholy moment. And you know me, I'm a fan of those ambiguous kind of melancholy moments, like the end of Charlie X or the end of City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. You do this ending maybe a little too much honor by comparing it to those, though, I think.
Well,
it's definitely a better ending than Spock's pun.
Well, yeah, because all we had to do then was freeze frame, and we're out of there. But at least we undid that a little.
Wow, you've got Joanne Worley saying "sock it to me" at the end of his pun.
Right.
Boom. Okay.
Right.
It's interesting to me. I have a question. Because you've got a plot hole coming up later in the show, and it's a pretty big one, but I think this one is bigger, so we just need to go ahead and dispense with it.
Okay.
They can't pick them up on sensors. They can't see them. They just hear a buzz, right?
Right.
How did they actually beam them up?
Right.
Now, and when you think it's like a mosquito or something, then you say, oh, well, it could just, could have landed on Kirk's collar or something like that. But, I mean, these are full-grown people. They're just living really fast. How did they end up being beamed up?
Well, and we know that they got beamed up because they say, oh, that process is really slow.
Took forever.
Right? Yeah, it's at the speed of light.
Right.
And it's really slow. And there would be, here we go, jumping the timeline, talking about pattern buffers and transporter technology and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
There are things like that accounted for when you get into later Star Trek, when you say, like, oh, the transporter knows if you picked up bacteria or a virus or blah, 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 and it can kind of screen that out. But here you've got whole people. You got 5 Scalosians.
Right. You got 5 Scalosians. You've got 3 people beaming up on the Enterprise. You've got 6 spots in the transporter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've got equipment with them. And,
Well, equipment, I mean, hey, if you can figure out how to, squeeze 8 people into a 6-person transport, then the equipment, I imagine, is not going to be that difficult. I'm still stuck on, if you can get the people up there, I'm fine with the equipment getting there. I'm not fine with the people getting there.
Yeah. Big plot hole. I agree with you.
Sped through the end of this episode. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Speaking of speeding to the end, I'm a little worried here because I think we end up how we ended up in other Star Trek episodes where we get there to the end and it's Kirk just basically asking the aliens who have a nefarious plan that propagates their species to please be good.
Oh, I don't think so.
No?
No, I think what he told Deela is absolutely true. What she told him is absolutely true. They'll be calling Starfleet and coning off this planet.
Oh, yeah. Well, just like they did for Talos 4.
Yeah.
DC. Well, that worked out because anybody who can steal a starship just goes straight to Talos 4.
Well,
yeah.
But, I mean, there have been other places where we've seen them do that, too. We've talked about that before, where they're just like, they come across some sort of alien contagion or something, and they're like, okay, well, nobody go near that planet
don't go
anymore.
There. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's what's going to happen. Thing is, you're only going to have to do it for what, like 6 weeks?
Because they're all going to be gone.
Right. There are only 5 of them left. They're not going to be able to. Oh, no. There is going to be another. Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
I guess there's going to be a Kirklet.
Right.
There's a good chance there will be. So, I mean, it may have to be maybe 12 weeks.
Yeah.
This planet's off limits. And then they go back and live at the 67 Expo.
Right.
Which I know would make you happy. Yeah.
Make me very happy, yeah. I love how the distress call and any playback is on film.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool because that's something that now really has no analog. And I mean that as a comparison, not analog. It's another pun.
Yeah.
But I love that because, okay, if you and I are having a chat on video on a computer, there's no film loop. There's not even static. You either lose the signal or you don't.
Yeah. What I don't understand is how is it that a repeating message confounds them so?
Yeah, right.
But I'm standing right here where they're calling from. I mean, we've seen automated messages before in Star Trek.
Yes.
I mean, this has happened. Like, they get someplace and like, whoa, this ship's been dead for 1,000 years. It must have been an automated message. But this week, we've never heard of those.
Right.
So, no, seriously, do you see me? Wait, I'm waving. Can you see me now? No, I'm still watching the message that I'm receiving. I mean, I didn't really get that part.
Unfortunately, there was a camera crew capturing exactly what happened during the landing party at the beginning.
It made me nuts,
Spock
too.
can play that back, yeah.
Let's check the dailies. That's pretty much it, right?
Exactly.
That's like 3 cameras shot and everything. I mean, this, again, you mentioned the Scalosians, second mention right here. I mean, that's pretty much what it was, right?
Right.
We don't have recordings of everything. Oh, well, but the Scalosians can do that. Oh, and we can too, I guess. We just don't like to sometimes.
Yeah. Hey, did Kirk say sabotage or sabotage?
I don't know.
I think it sounded a little... She says sabotage, and then he says something that's a little bit different.
There was something else he said, too, that I was like, that's a weird pronunciation for that. But, he is Canadian. Well, not Kirk, but...
Yeah, they just have a different word for everything.
A different word for everything. Some of them are even like French. It's crazy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, did you notice that sound effect in the background whenever they are in accelerated space?
No. I noticed the buzzing, of course, when, in normal space, when one of those things is supposed to be going by. One of those things turning out to be people, of course.
Right. In one of the many times I watched this episode, I watched it with headphones on in my computer. And, it was really nice to be able to pick up just everything that's happening in the soundtrack. And there's a great effect that they use that it sort of sounds like, in its simplest term, maybe like an air conditioner that's been slowed down. So there is a soundscape to the world that they're in when they're in accelerated space. I thought it was really cool, and it was a nice little subtle thing to differentiate real time from their time. And there's another pretty cool, very subtle effect when they show the Scalosian Environmental Control Unit. So all those the tiny little details I picked up when watching it the 4th or 5th time or whatever, but really, really cool. So if you haven't noticed that, put on your headphones when we're done here and just listen to any of those scenes, and you'll notice that the environment changes. It's kind of cool. How did you like the bit with Compton saying that he's also met a girl? So I had to then think about if this is part of the Scalosian evolutionary advantage. They're all mostly very good-looking people. The men need a little help with their fashion.
Yeah.
You can tell that the Scalosians have evolved into just being very good-looking. And I wonder if this is something that has happened over the generations with their disadvantage of the radiation and everything that has made them accelerated, or is this something they had before anyway? But that seems to be a power that they have.
That's an interesting question, because when Deela is describing it to Kirk, you kind of get the impression that she's saying that, living this sped up life is what they sort of adjust to. But you're right. It could totally just be, falling under the influence of the thrall of the women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's so earnest about it, though.
Right. Very much so.
I met a girl. Oh, okay, really? And that's it? Yeah, so
right.
I met a girl. Okay, and then what happened? Well, then I told her how to take over the Enterprise.
Well, and then you're going to get kicked in the face.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Jerk. Yeah. I meet a girl every week, says Kirk. I don't tell any of them how to take over the Enterprise. God. He is just the worst character. I'm sorry, he is just... You know what he made me? I felt bad for our man Darnell. Remember Darnell from from the Man Trap? Michael Zaslow, the Zaz, like the first actor with which I really connected since we started doing Mission Log, right?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So they find Zaslow dead, right? Or they find Darnell dead, and Bones is like, he must have eaten something he found on the ground. He must have eaten the local vegetation. And everybody's willing to accept that. And I really thought they had given him short shrift, just being willing to accept that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And no, it turns out this is actually a thing that subordinates do, because so here's Compton. He has been told to gather water samples apparently from this fountain, and he's counting them. He's being very like meticulous about it. He's got eight. He's got 8 samples. And then so he's got the samples, which they're presumably going to study because something has killed close to 900,000 people on this planet. right. Could be the water. Yeah. Oh, do I have something on my lips? Here, let me wash my lips off with this water from this alien world.
He's relishing. It's like a guy who just ate a bucket of KFC. He's like licking his fingers, like, oh, that's Scalosian water. It's so good. Oh, yeah.
Brian Regan used to have this wonderful thing about people who at water fountains drinking like oh man, I'm parched. Oh, I've been out in the desert all day eating rocks and sand. And it's that's sort of like our man Compton there. Careful though, because I understand it's water. And maybe all day he's faced the barren waste without the taste of it.
Yeah.
Seriously, wait till you get back to the Enterprise, to the water that you know. I picture from now on, like Kirk with every away team or every landing party or whatever, saying, all right, we're getting ready to beam down. I can't believe I have to say this, but when we get down to the planet, don't put your lips on anything.
No, wait. I think it's the opposite. I think that there's some bad training at Starfleet, because if they accepted this about Darnell in the man trap and they fully accept this about Compton, I think there's a professor at Starfleet who's like, here's the button you push when you want to go fast in the ship. Here's how you fire a phaser. Here's how you keep your uniform neat. And by the way, the galaxy is delicious, so eat up.
It's the lazy detective who will only investigate with his ears and his eyes and his nose. You really want to get the feel for a planet?
You gotta taste it.
Training our eyes on the Scalosians again, we find their society having advanced as far as covering their naughty bits out of a sense of shame and self-protection. They've also developed nervous laughter. Gosh, their society is moving fast.
You have a problem with the way that, which I think we're going to get through, in like the 13 to 17 years that we're doing this show.
Right.
But with the way this show is laid out, you have a particular problem.
I have a very big problem.
Okay.
I think this is a huge, huge plot hole.
I'm not understanding what your problem is, so please.
All right.
Go ahead.
So think of this. We have an A plot and a B plot. Okay. And let's say the A plot is Kirk doing all of his things in accelerated time. And then we have the B plot, which is everybody else in normal time. So Spock and McCoy trying to figure out what's happening. Scotty doing his thing, all that other stuff. All right. Mm-hmm. But the effect of the acceleration is that Kirk and the Scalosians are moving so fast, doing everything that they're doing so fast, that they cannot even be seen by anybody else on the Enterprise who is operating in normal time. Mm-hmm. So by that logic, by the logic of the show, everything that Kirk does, from first meeting Deela to going down through the environmental controls to killing Compton, to having his rendezvous with Deela, to sabotaging the transporter, all of that stuff happens in less time than it would take for, say, Spock and McCoy to go down to sick bay to work on the computer to try to figure out what the problem is.
Right.
So all of that has to happen. And then you have the moment of Kirk leaving a message, which they have to find, decode, slow down. So what I'm saying is the plot hole here is that the compression of time doesn't work. The Scalosians would have had time to finish their entire thing, defeat Kirk. I mean, even if they have to lock up Kirk 50 times because he keeps sabotaging their plans, they would have time to do that over and over and over and over again, while Spock and McCoy are still stuck in the turbolift trying to get down to the medical lab. That's the plot hole to me.
Okay. I see what you're saying now. It took me a minute. I mean, I think you're trying really, I mean, you're applying too much logic to something that's not very logical. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you're...
Well, I mean, okay, here's the thing.
Not to be a jerk, it's just a show.
Well,
I mean...
well, of course.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and if if we're trying to figure out how to build this society, then we may have a problem. But I mean, some of it you got to let go.
But to me, that is the fun of this show. The fun of this show is that everything Kirk is doing is in this compressed time. Mm-hmm. Therefore, all the other crew members of the Enterprise are frozen like statues. And then at the very end, by the time they've figured out the problem, by the time Spock and McCoy have figured out the problem, gotten the message, discovered it was the water, figured out an antidote, done all of this stuff, then Spock takes the Scalosian water and boom, he's lockstep with Kirk at the end of Kirk's journey, ready to go confront Rael and destroy the environmental thing, So all of that, it's a much more intriguing difference to me when you do things like. Here we go. Let's destroy the timeline. When you do things like Picard getting hit in the inner light and living out an entire life on another planet, but then when he wakes up, literally seconds have passed on the Enterprise bridge.
Right. Or it's like that thing like we talked about before in the movie Contact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Where it takes her maybe 10 seconds to drop from the top of the thing to the bottom of the thing, but she's been gone for 17 hours as far as she knows.
I agree with you. I'm taking it much too seriously for this episode because there are many things that I like about this episode, and there are many things to kind of be critical and have fun with this episode.
Yeah.
But to me, like, that is the intriguing part, is messing with the timeline. So when you establish the rule, but then the rule just goes out the window, I'm going to think about that.
Well, the problem is you're treating this like an episode of 24, though. I mean, the idea behind the TV series 24, for people who don't remember it or never saw it, was that everything that we're watching is actually happening in real time. So 24 episodes in a season of 24, and we're watching a whole day of that show. Mm-hmm. You're sort of treating what's happening on this show like an episode of 24. I mean, we don't know everything that's been going on with Kirk the whole time, unless you believe that we've just been following him around with like a hand cam the whole time.
Right. Well, true.
We have no idea how long the rendezvous with Deela took.
Hours. I'm saying hours. But here's the thing. We do know that Scalosians move faster than the speed of light, because the transporter is really, really slow. And when Kirk pulls out the phaser and tries to shoot Deela, she steps out of the way of a beam moving at the speed of light, which, by the way, is hilarious to me, because at some point then Uhura is just going to go like, whoa, somebody just shot my control panel with a phaser. Who has the phaser? Put down the phaser.
Yeah, I thought about that. Luckily, it was only on stun.
Right.
and I mean, it would have been like the smallest possible blip of that you would have been able to imagine, because again, they were moving so fast.
Right.
It is kind of neat though. It's a little bullet time thing where she just like steps out of the way.
Yeah.
Very cute. Can we go ahead and jump to her?
Let's do it.
Oh man.
I
think she may actually be my favorite Kirk girl.
I think so far I have to agree with you, and I agree with you for a lot of reasons. You go first.
Well, I'm in love. I mean, there's nothing else to say.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I love the fact that she's ostensibly in control, although she's not. I can't tell if she actually is, or if it's just something that she tells herself, because she says she's their queen, but there are 5 of them. Mm-hmm. Right. And she's actually one of them. Right. So really she's queen over 4. Plus, she tells Rael what to do, and he's like, he'll go along with it, but he really hates it, and he sort of seems to not like her very much half the time, and he'll just start fighting Kirk anyway, even though she told him not to. So I think queen may be sort of like an honorary term. That may be something that they let her go ahead and say, because, face it, there are 5 of us. Right. What are we going to do?
Right.
I love how playful she is with Kirk, though. Like, oh, you're gonna stun me? Okay, you go ahead. I'll stand right. I'll stand right here. You go ahead and try to get me. I like the fact that she's just very forthright with him. I mean, she's and there's a playfulness about her too. Like, the whole thing where she knows that Kirk has sabotaged the the transporter, and she's just really cute about it. She's like, if I didn't know better. And it's very there's something that's very wonderful about her. There's no deceit. She's very wide-eyed. She's very sweet about the whole thing. Well, except for the part where she's kissing him when I mean, there's a lot to not like about her too, but it's also forgivable. And maybe it's the acting. I don't know what it is about her exactly, but I was as smitten as Kirk was pretending to be when he was getting ready to steal whatever that weapon that she had was.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. It's as far as Star Trek villains go, here we have another villain that isn't bad just for the sake of being bad. There's a motivation here, which I thought was interesting to explore. And she has interesting powers to be able to do that. There's the seductive quality, obviously. But she is smart, she's manipulative, and she's looking out for her people. So I like her as a villain anyway. And she's very direct about her intentions, and she just sort of exudes power. And it's one of these things that you have to wonder, is it the writing, is it the directing, is it the acting, is it the perfect combination of all three? She's got Rail on a short string. Yeah. And that is great to watch. The scene where Rail comes in after the rendezvous and she puts him in his place. You have no right to question what I just did. Basically saying, like, look, your jealousy is not even a blip on my radar. I thought that was fantastic.
Well, except, of course, it actually is. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, in that way, she may actually be queen or she may actually be a captain. I mean, it actually does bother her that he is bothered. But she does the leader thing and says, I'm doing what I have to do. I am doing my duty. Now, she does also say, I'm also going to enjoy it. But apparently they haven't always. I mean, what was the line? Allow me the dignity of enjoying the man I've chosen.
Oh, that was great.
Which actually, it's kind of an interesting line. You see, it's so interesting to me, though, that you have a problem. The timeline is what's bothering you about this episode, because really, the way their society is set up or the way they're continuing their society does not work. I mean, it doesn't work at all. Because it's just humans that keep coming by, and how often are they having to do that? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they would actually need to capture a spaceship like every 4 weeks, right?
right.
In our time, and they would have lived generations at that point.
Yeah.
I'm not trying. I'm not trying to poke holes in the episode. I think I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Sure.
There is another serious problem with the way the Enterprise is run, I think. And this has to do with Bones. So Kirk's there, and he's hearing this buzzing. And then suddenly he's convinced that something is touching him. Mm-hmm. But there is nothing there that anybody can pick up. And remember, the computer hasn't sussed out yet that there's an alien presence on board. They didn't know that anything beamed up with them. So all we've really got is Kirk being a little twitchy, right?
Yeah.
And so he says to McCoy, could I be hallucinating? And McCoy's like, no, sir, you absolutely cannot be hallucinating. I don't know if McCoy's saying that because medically he can't be hallucinating, or because it would really screw with McCoy's head if the captain went crazy.
Right. Right.
400 some odd people answering to this guy. McCoy, is there something wrong with me? There is nothing wrong with you. There's don't even la 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 la. There's nothing wrong with you. It struck me as kind of not very medicine-y on McCoy's part to just not even accept the possibility that there might be something wrong. Now, of course, there wasn't something wrong, but not physically wrong with Kirk at that point. But I was a little. It's again, maybe it's that bendy nature of McCoy that we talked about a week or two ago.
Yeah, it seems like the right answer would have been like, well, I hope you're not hallucinating, but maybe we should run some tests to make sure you're not.
Tell you what, I'm going to tie you up.
Right.
And we'll go from there. Sometimes it works. Yeah.
Yeah. This episode, as you pointed out, has a very close parallel to By Any Other Name.
Yes.
And in many, many ways, not just sort of the idea of taking over the Enterprise and all that stuff, but they are undone. The humans use human weakness like jealousy and greed and hubris in a way to defeat the aliens. Kirk found another problem he could seduce his way out of. As long as he drives Rael with some jealousy and he makes Deela believe that he's going to go along with her. These are all, tricks that he has up his sleeve that he's done before in order to get out of it. But we also have the bigger plot parallel of the aliens just trying to survive, just trying to do the thing that they need to do, and the Enterprise happens to be their method of doing it.
It's interesting. I didn't actually see them using the jealousy this time. There are similarities in that respect of, human, alien, hots for each other, and then we're good. But it was really only the aliens stealing the ship and taking what they needed were the things that ran parallel to me. I didn't see the motivations, at least as far as Kirk playing the aliens off of each other, because I didn't really feel like he did. I didn't feel like he played off of anybody's weakness at all. I don't even feel like he seduced his way out of it. I mean, she had eyes for him immediately, sort of like the woman that was in love with Bones a couple of weeks ago. Just wow, I'm into you. I'm so into you. I'm going to kiss you and you're not even going to know it. And then I'm actually going to, and then I'm going to make you live in my time so you can know I'm kissing you. And then maybe we could, sneak off someplace and you could put your boots back on.
Right. Right.
You know what that means? That means his boots were off. And you know what that means?
He was shining his shoes.
He was walking around without shoes.
Yeah.
Pretty much it.
But no, here's the thing. In By Any Other Name, he uses the jealousy very specifically to get under their skin.
Right.
In this episode, the seduction is not necessarily he's got to drag it out of her, but the seduction is, hey, I'm on your side now. I'm going to go along with you. So I didn't necessarily mean that part of it in a sexual way, because there's plenty of other sexual content in this. And the jealousy driving a wedge between him and Rael is enough of a distraction for Rael, is sort of a positive side effect as far as Kirk is concerned. He has messed them up. He has distracted them enough with what's going on that he can hopefully go back in and fix it.
Yeah, I didn't feel like that was even a thing. I mean, I felt like that was
interesting. Yeah.
I felt like that was going to happen no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I will say, actually, Deela's one weakness in this episode is how quickly. So she liked Kirk when Kirk was all, strong-willed and sort of resisting her.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kirk becomes docile and she doesn't like him as much anymore. And at that point, she immediately realizes how much she loves Rael. Oh, right. It turns out the reason I liked you is because you're so much like Rael. That kind of bothered me. That happened a little too fast. I wish we had seen more similarities between the two of them. It would have actually been neat for her to have to come to that realization in a way that we could have actually watched. Rael's jealousy really otherwise doesn't seem to play into it at all to me. It's sort of like, sure, that's going to happen because he's in love with her. But it wasn't used to any effect, it doesn't seem. Except that Rael actually grows a tiny bit in this episode. He's like all jealousy and anger. And then she's like, hey, look, this is just what I have to do. And so then later he's like, when she says the whole thing about, so wait, the transporter's fixed? Why didn't you tell me?
Right.
I was giving you your space.
Yeah.
I mean, he matures.
Right.
In this episode, which is kind of weird because he's a little more than an extra.
There's a lot of that going on here. You do what you have to do, or you did what you had to do. Deela even confronts Kirk with that, saying, you would do the same thing to ensure the survival of your species. Kirk says, no, we wouldn't.
He doesn't even, did he even say no, we wouldn't?
Well, he says, he basically says, you brought this problem on yourself. this is your problem. Your world was destroyed by your own shortcomings. So the implication there is, no, we wouldn't. We're better than you because we wouldn't take over somebody else or exploit somebody else's power or abilities in order to further our own survival. And Kirk has been confronted with that idea before, and we kind of talked about that a little bit in By Any Other Name. What are our limits when faced with either a small problem or a very large problem, like, the extinction of our species. So I think there's maybe a little bit of sympathy to be found for the Scalosian problem.
Yeah. It's interesting, though. I mean, it almost feels like, and I think we talked about this either last week or the week before, and I apologize for not remembering. Mm-hmm. It's almost like Kirk doesn't even make the Kirk speech anymore, in a way. I mean, because in the first season, or maybe even the first half of the second season, Kirk would have tried to reason. He would have tried to explain, well, no, here's why we can't do that, and this is why we wouldn't do this, and all that kind of stuff. And now she's like, you do it, and he's like, eh. I mean, that's really kind of it. I mean, and the thing is, I was like, oh, here comes the speech, because we know that Kirk would not do that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we didn't even get the speech this time. And we didn't even get, sometimes you'll get a parallel where it's like, oh, wow. So now he is in that situation. Will he do that? It's more like, well, he's a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
To use a joke that'll mean something in about 15 years.
Oh, it'll pay off. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm left with a strange feeling about this at the end, because they just, as you said, they go back to the planet. We put the cones around the planet and say, okay, nobody get near enough, and nobody answer their distress call. Right. Because the Deela and the Scalosians seemingly just accept that is what will happen, that there will be no more ships coming by. They are resigned to their fate. They reject the idea of the Federation helping.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't feel like they rejected the idea of the Federation helping. I feel like they rejected the possibility that anybody could help them. Mm-hmm. Now, I do wonder why Spock didn't pull Kirk aside and say, I might actually be able to help these people. Like, I really might be able to help these people. Because the reason Deela says, no, we can't do that, is because they've tried it before and people have died, right? Yeah. Trying to decelerate. Spock is pretty convinced that he's got a way to decelerate. And I got to say, I love, by the way, it's a fantastic... It's just a momentary thing, but here again we've sort of got the examination of the characters of Kirk and Spock, especially. Mm-hmm. Spock doesn't know for certain that he's going to be able to slow down. Spock is being very cavalier again about the Enterprise. This is another one of those things where he probably should have sent someone else, maybe solicited volunteers, because Spock is second in command, and he is going to risk his life to save Kirk. Now, it's cool that he's going to risk his life to save Kirk, but this is very not Vulcan. It's very Spock, but it's very not Vulcan, because, their captain has winked out of existence for all intents and purposes, right? Mm-hmm. He is working on trying to get the captain back, but how he's going to do that is also wink out of existence. Okay, this may shake morale a tiny bit. Additionally, if he's not able to come back, Scotty is now in command of the Enterprise. And I'm not saying Scotty's not fine to leave in command while you're, orbiting a planet. I'm not saying that Scotty can't handle himself in some situations. I don't think you want to automatically turn over control of the Enterprise. Well, you don't want to automatically turn over control of the Enterprise to anybody. If you've got a captain, you want him to be the guy. Now, if he's gone, okay, you want it to be your second in command. Okay, now if he's suddenly gone too, we may start to have issues. But Spock is just like, well, how are we going to get the antidote to Kirk? Well, I'm going to knock this back. And he just does. And it really is kind of a neat moment. At the same time, he's really rolling the dice with both the Enterprise and its crew. All that said, though, he thinks he's got a way to come out of this. Yeah. You say Deela, rejected the help of the Enterprise. It's more like Deela's just, they've been looking, apparently, through all these generations, which in our time may, in fact, be only 6 months. But in all of these generations, they've been looking for something, and it's killed the people who've tried it. So now she's just, given up. There's not going to be a way. And there's even a look between Kirk and Spock while she's saying it can't happen. And for some reason, they seem to have this unspoken, don't tell her.
Yeah.
We could actually do this. And I don't know.
That bothered me.
I don't know why that is, because they're not a particularly dangerous race. The only reason they're dangerous is because they're living accelerated.
Right.
I mean, that's it. And so if we could solve that problem, then they wouldn't be dangerous at all. And we could all go back to the 67 Expo.
Right.
But instead, we're going to cordon off this planet. We're going to let these people die. And as soon as they're gone, Spock's like, oh, by the way, drink this. And you'll be back to real time in no time.
Well, here's the thing. So if Kirk had even proposed, or McCoy had proposed, that they beam down several gallons of that deceleration formula into their water supply, does Spock then say, oh, no, we're violating the Prime Directive. You can't do that.
Well, now that's interesting. Maybe that's why Spock and Kirk didn't offer it. Although, because
I feel like that's, that's as easy a solution as you can get, but maybe it's too easy, Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. I mean, does the Prime Directive require that they let what's left of this race die in 6 weeks, though? Right. I would hope not. I mean,
well, it's either that or Spock and Kirk are just being jerks. I mean, it's one of the two.
Yeah.
I mean, so let's go ahead and say it's the Prime Directive. Otherwise, they're just homicidal maniacs with a spaceship.
Since the start of this episode, the Scalosians have advanced to the point of inventing dentistry, the 3-camera sitcom shoot, and the whoopee cushion. They'll be ready for the Enterprise in no time.
All right, Ken, we are careening at accelerating speed toward the end of the episode, but we have to put on the brakes just a moment to give our final wrap-up, our final thoughts on Wink of an Eye. So we'll kick it off as we always do to figure out if the episode holds up. Now, I get the feeling that you do not hold this nearly in as high regard as By Any Other Name or some of the other episodes to which we might compare this.
I don't feel like there's as much. I mean, I hold it in higher regard in some ways and then less in others. I feel like, I mean, because we've seen By Any Other Name, I kind of felt like we were watching that again. I don't feel like there's as much of an examination of sort of the people and their motivations and things like that. But I could watch Deela all day long. I mean, and honestly, the play between Deela and Kirk, before Kirk starts acting like a little, Mary's little lamb,
right?
Is fun. I mean, there's a lot of great interplay there. And I know it sounds like I'm just being sort of like a lecherous or boyishy, sexy kind of person. Her outfit's nice, I will say that. But there's a character to her. She's not just girl of the week. I mean, she shows up again, kind of like I wish I could remember her name. The woman that Bones fell for. And vice versa.
Natira. Yeah.
Natira, yeah, kind of like Natira. Yeah. She shows up with her own motivation. She shows up with her own way of acting. She shows up with her own backbone. I mean, she's really she's a great character, and is a lot of fun to watch. No, I don't think this episode is as strong as By Any Other Name, but I mean, she's just fun, and I like the idea. I mean, despite the problem that you have with they're intersecting times and how long would that have been and all that stuff, I like the idea of everybody sort of existing on the Enterprise at the same time. And I like the whole hyperspeed idea. I remember that episode of Wild Wild West that you were talking about, by the way. I think I may have only seen 2. And there was a problem, right, where they were moving so fast that they were actually burning up from the friction.
Yes, right.
Yeah, same kind of thing here, which is interesting to hear about that sort of a...
Yeah.
Not crossover exactly, but to hear that idea represented. So, I mean, there's a lot that's fun about this episode, but this definitely goes in the, it's fine. I would say it's a little bit better than fine because of Deela and because of the interplay between Deela and Kirk. But, I mean, no, it's not one of the strongest episodes. I mean, it's good for season 3 especially, but it's not, no, it's not over the top. What about you?
I think I hold it overall in a bit higher regard than you do. Even though I picked apart that the plot hole with the whole timeline thing, I still found that part of it to be a lot of fun, and it really engaged kind of my thought of the sense of space and time on the Enterprise. So I had fun with that, even though it frustrated me picking it apart. But that's cool because that's kind of what you do with science fiction.
I'm sorry. Can we hold on a second? Why do you keep saying that you like it more than I do? Because I don't think I dislike it.
Oh, well, but you said overall it was sort of like better than some, but I would put it up there in maybe not my top 10, but it's nearly up there.
Really? It's nearly top 10 for you?
Well, no. There's 10 that are far better than this. Okay, there are 15 that are far better than this.
See, I think you and I like it the same amount. You're just trying to make me the bad guy this week.
Maybe.
Because I found it, I found it enjoyable. I was surprised, actually. There are some, and again, especially in season 3, there are some that we've watched where by the time we get to Act 3, I'm like, really? We're not at Act 4 yet? I mean, there are some that are like, very almost torturous to watch. Mm-hmm. And this one, I was surprised each time that I watched it that we were already getting to the end of it. I mean, it's got good pacing. It's got good acting. It seemed like a good episode to me. I mean, and devoid of a lot of these sort of examination stuff that we've done. There's no real huge message here. There's no hidden message here, I don't think.
No.
But it's an enjoyable episode, I think.
Yeah. We ask, does it hold up? And I think it does. It's got the fun sci-fi elements. Deela is what sells it. And it's a character with nuance. It's a character where you can kind of see the gears turning in her head as she's going through this bizarre situation. And it's one of those really tough balances that TV tends to not do a very good job at, which is to have kind of the sex appeal and the power and the complexity of character. So we don't always get that brought together in an entertaining, enjoyable way on TV. It tends to play off very high extremes. But we kind of hit on all cylinders here with the character of Deela. So, as an episode, I think it's quite good.
Yeah.
And maybe we've been kind of stuck in the mire of season 3 here, where we're sort of grasping at anything to be great. But this is one that I enjoyed watching over and over again, and certainly I had no problem watching it again when I'm actually able to watch Star Trek just purely on my own volition again.
Yeah.
In terms of messages, I agree with you. This is not a strong message episode. I think the points to contemplate here are what we already brought up in By Another Name, which is, how far do we go when we're trying to save ourselves? What are the limits we impose upon ourselves? That kind of thing. But really, it's about the character experience. That's what it's all about. It's about that great interplay and dialogue and kind of the fun of the science fiction. There's also that sort of great fantasy fulfillment idea of Spock doing his thing where he's still on the accelerator, just going around fixing things. And you go like, oh man, if I had that, if I had just a drop of that formula that I could use for a day, a couple of days, imagine what I could accomplish.
Yeah,
we would be done with mission log in a week.
I actually did wonder if, there's not some secret part of Starfleet that from then on is sort of accelerating and decelerating. Because remember, they came back with 8 vials of that.
Yeah, they have this formula now. Oh, man.
Although I will be honest, I was a little worried that Spock was going to come back 70.
Right. Yeah.
Because he was fixing everything on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And taking his own time to do it right. Well, that brings us to the end then. And Ken, there's always more Star Trek to look forward to. So what do we have to look forward to next week?
Look forward to is an interesting term. But next week, we have The Empath.
Some Some of the music for the mission log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages, by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. To keep up, you have to watch The Empath before next week. I feel for you. See what I did there? End transmission.
Now leaving Nerdist.com.